Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/slash Tales from Tech Support. In today's episode, document your network or else. Can you rebuild our company? End user tries to repair swollen battery without a new battery. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Document your network or else. Way back at the turn of the century, 2001 I think, I was working in a university computer research department. The guy who had hired me had moved on, and I was the only support person around until we could hire someone. Our network infrastructure was pretty primitive, no firewall, no managed switches, and poorly documented cable mapping. Our primary patch panel had over 400 drops. Some were labeled with what room and plate number they connected to, many did not. The wall plates in many offices were not labeled, or worse, incorrectly labeled. At this time we didn't have a cable tracer. One day I got an email from the university computer security guys. They had been contacted by someone reporting malicious activity from the university. The IP traced back to my department. The IP was on one of my Class C networks, so I went to work to find the malicious machine. We had a lot of students running self-administered systems in those days, so this was not completely unknown. The problem was our switches were so old I had no way to find which switch port was connected to the bad system. I could narrow things down to a stack of switches, each had 48 ports, although not all were connected. I set up a laptop running a ping to the bad IP, and started pulling the patch cables one at a time. Really basic, right? I found what appeared to be the correct connection after a few minutes. So, the immediate problem was solved. This system was off the network, but I still needed to find the system, find the student, ensure the system got patched, all that jazz. I traced the patch cord to the patch panel. It was labeled with a room and plate number. No problem, I had a sub-master key so I could access every office in that area. I walked to the room and found no computer, no monitor, no keyboard, not even a desk. There was a lot of junk, old chairs, a futon, a partition, so the room could be divided for two people, lots of various trash on the floor. I guessed one of the grad students had actually been living in it, against the rules, but it happened. I was really scratching my head, checked the wall plate in the room, nothing plugged in at all. There were a couple of old power cords scattered around, but no computer. Went back to the server room and repeated all the steps, confirmed I had disconnected the correct switch port. I spent some time checking nearby offices, in case the wall plate was in a different office, but found nothing. It was really bugging me, so I went back to the original office, and did a more complete search. And of course, there was an old desktop computer, no monitor or keyboard, hidden behind the futon and connected to a second wall port. I left a please see me note on the computer, removed the network cable, and asked our department administrator who was in the office. No one was. Okay, who used to be in the office? Some student, no longer at the university. Back to the office, yanked the computer. It wasn't a university-owned computer, student must have bought it himself. I stored the computer and figured I'd wait to see if anyone complained. No one did, so after a month or so sent it to e-waste. I also created a project for myself, get a cable tracer and a label maker, and had some students start checking and labeling the drops in the whole department. There were many occasions when I'd get a request to activate a wall plate and spend an hour trying to figure out which patch panel it connected to. Can you rebuild our company? Several years ago, I worked as a software developer for a company that provided network and desktop support for our customers. This story is about a new customer we got, that was an e-commerce business. They hired us to fix some of their servers, but the problem was much, much deeper than that. It seems that the company had, over a period of several years, gradually let go each and every person in their IT department. The last IT employee had provided a couple of Word documents containing some server IPs and admin credentials, and then they let him go. This seemed to be part of a larger pattern, as the company was housed in a large business complex, which they used to fully occupy. However, half of the building was now unoccupied, a significant portion of the building was sublet to other companies, and the current staff was maybe half a dozen people. This company had over a dozen servers, but no network diagram, and no one there who even understood what most of the servers did. Our techs did their best to sort it out based on the documentation from former IT, and managed to restore the server that failed. That server failing was what prompted the company to reach out to us. A couple of weeks later, I was called in to meet with the person running the company. The actual owners were completely removed from the company's operations. It was simply a cash cow that they had zero involvement with. It seemed that separate from the initial failed server, their e-commerce site was now broken. Keep in mind, this e-commerce site is literally the entire product of the company. They wanted me to fix the site. However, they didn't have any documentation for the site. They didn't have anyone on staff who understood the code base. They didn't have credential to the source control. They didn't even know which servers the application was hosted on. Apparently they had outsourced 100% of the development of the application to Russian programmers, were in the US, nearly a decade ago. The programmers built the app, configured all of the interactions, and provided zero documentation, or possibly the company discarded the documentation. After some investigation, I discovered that the application was actually scattered among at least 3 different servers. 2 of the servers were AWS, and the company did not know the username and password of the AWS account. They did have credentials for the 3rd server, but that was simply the host for the front-end interface and a customer mailing list. All of the actual business logic, which the manager I was working with could only explain in the most rudimentary terms, was hosted on those 2 AWS sites. I did find the problem, an expired security certificate, and we got them back up and running, but I did my best to explain that if anything else went wrong, there was an excellent chance that there would be no way to fix it. 2 weeks later, the site went down again. One of the AWS sites wasn't accepting HTTP requests anymore. When I explained that I couldn't access the server to find out what was happening, because they didn't have credentials, I was asked if I could just rebuild the application on a new server. I told them that it was possible, but that I'd need someone to explain, in detail, all of the necessary business logic, and that they'd lose their customer database, again, no credentials, and have to start that over from scratch. They said oh okay, and that was the end of the conversation. I have no idea if they're still in business. End user tries to repair swollen battery, without a new battery. A little bit of backstory: I work in Tier 2 desktop support for a large enterprise, and we have a leasing and service contract with one of the larger PC manufacturers. Basically, one day I'm working on some random virtual machine issue, when I get an escalation from a Tier 1 team for a user that has a swollen battery. This model is absolutely notorious for batteries doing this, and it's about 50% of our work orders for these devices, so I assume it's a run-of-the-mill repair case. I start opening the vendor's business support site and start creating the case. Little did I know, this case would never be submitted. The end user comes on the line and we exchange pleasantries, then we get down to business. How bad is the swollen battery, and does he have pictures? He tells me the battery is really swollen, and he tried to fix it, but wasn't able to. I was quite confused, as you can't really fix a swollen battery without just replacing it. I ask him to clarify and he begins to clam up and backpedal a bit, but he knows I'm onto him. I ask him to send a picture of it, and he sends me a picture with the laptop entirely disassembled, and he had removed the battery and put it in rice because he thought that would fix it. Needless to say, this was definitely a violation of the service agreement, and the device was basically written off after that, seeing as he had done quite a number on the hardware. Keep in mind, the most dangerous people are those who know enough to think they know it all, which is when you get situations like this.